okay? And this may or may not work for you, but I keep about, on my back foot, about a 60-40 weight distribution. The ball of my foot has about, you hear guys saying, no, all your weight should be on the balls of your feet. You're kind of I feel a little unstable when all my weight's on the balls of my feet. I don't feel like I have really the best traction. So my back foot is 60% on the ball of my foot, well, 40% on the heel. It's almost evenly distributed on my back foot. That's when I start. My front foot, I've got most of my weight on my heel, like 70-80% on my heel. Because for me, that keeps a little tension in the front of the shin and allows me to step forward just a little bit quicker. And you can feel when you do that, as you dig in with your heel and the ball of your foot, you can feel yourself pushing against the ground in both directions. That stabilizes you. Martial artists, who's got a martial arts background, right? You get that gripping with the feet, you know, grip the tatami. It's the same principle, okay? Okay, I want everybody right now drop into your stance. You're okay. We'll kick the camera over. All right? So I want everybody to feel, actually close your eyes and feel where the weight distribution is in your regular stance. You don't need to change it, don't need to come around to my way, but I want you to feel it and recognize where it is. Think about it the next time you put on armor and you're facing somebody. Just take a second and think to yourself, why are my feet this way? What am I going to do that requires me to have this balance? Should I change this balance based on what I think I'm going to do? Okay? We should always be reviewing our own skills. Every time you step out there, you want to be in a position to do your best. You may have to change that from time to time. So be aware of it and be analyzing it all the time. That's how you improve. Feel all of it. Weight distribution, the tension in your legs, too high, you feel like you're going to get tired quick, you know, all of it. Okay. Oh, and other things like that, I always take a second to feel what's the ground like. Is the ground even? Am I going to, I'm fighting out on the grass where is the ground very dry, very hard? Am I going to step on something that might turn my foot a little bit at any moment? What's the ground like? How do my feet interact with the ground again? Okay, so stance. We all gone through stance. I hope we've gone through it in a little bit more detail now. It's the very next thing we talk about in every SCA class, developing power. Okay. Why? Why is that the most important thing?
If you don't hit him hard enough for him to acknowledge the blow.
How are you going to make the other guy dead? That's good. Yes, it is. We must, within our sport, we have it's not fencing where it's electric touch and all, you know, they got a certain amount of force, but only enough to register a touch. We have to hit somebody decisively. So we've got to develop power. But we only have to develop a certain amount of power. We don't have to continuously practice to develop more power. There's a point at which I've got plenty, I can hit hard enough now. Should I just stop working on developing power? No. Because we're developing power properly. We regain something else. We're developing power with our bodies. We get something else back in return. What? No. No, muscle memory, no. Yes, but no. Now where I'm going, precision. If you're developing power with your body, you get back precision. Because developing power is done with gross motors. Gross motor function. Big muscle groups, body weight balance, all that stuff goes into developing power. Precision, where does precision come from? From your elbow down, that's where precision comes from. Okay? If you are having to transmit power through your arm, whole time, you lose precision because now you are reduced to gross motor functioning. Right?
Yep.
Okay. A boxer uses weight. That's why they have weight classes. To throw a blow. So do we. You shift your weight forward, you generate power that can go into the circuit. Okay? But if you realize if you are just using your weight, who's got a full breastplate? Anybody got a solid breastplate? No, I mean on. Anybody? Listen. Everybody has watched Bruce Lee's 1-inch punch, right? Bruce Lee wasn't trying to. Bruce Lee wasn't trying to demonstrate how much power he can generate. Well, he was. He wasn't boasting. He was trying to demonstrate that your body generates lots of power by itself. You don't have. It's not this where the power comes from. It's from the body. So. Any reasonably trained SCA fighter should be able to do that. And that's all he was doing. If you watch the demonstrations, right, he's got the guy standing with his knees locked and his arms here and a chair behind him. So that when he does that, the guy falls onto the chair and falls over backwards and everybody goes, ooh, he knocked that guy down? Well, he knocked him off balance and he fell. Okay? So you are using your weight. But in that demonstration, I have to lock my arm into that spot so that I can put my weight into my hand. Okay? We're not really doing that. You can, and it's certainly valid from time to time. But what we're really trying to do is put the power into the weapon. And the weapon develops most of its power through momentum. Most. Okay? Okay, so I'm going to go back. Rotation of the body. March stance. What moves first? Hips. So, hips. Now, when I'm teaching, it's kind of an exaggerated kata. The hips move without shoulder movement. Hips move first. And some guys take a couple of years to learn how to do this. Ladies like it though.
I'm going to put that to music.
Alright, so moving the hips independent of the shoulders. What does this do? What it does is it develops tension in your core muscles. Okay? Because we are using our muscles to fight. But this is kind of like, think of winding the rubber band on those old balsa planes, right? You're building that tension in your core muscles and then releasing it and pulling a little more with the opposite muscles when you bring the shoulder forward. Your shoulder only goes a little ways past your hips. So the hip has to go forward first, then the shoulders, then the arm goes out. Okay? Now, that's how we teach it. That's the sequence. That sequence is important because of another fact. It's not just that developing. I used to talk about power is a helix. Power comes out of the ground, does a big spiral around your body, and comes out your hand. That's a good visual for kids. But what's really happening, and here's another principle, another little axiom. The hand is faster than the body, and the body is faster than the feet. What do I mean by that? This is very quick and not a lot of power. So these martial artists with a snap punch, that's mostly to blind somebody. Cut it. Okay? You can't really develop power with that shot. This is a little bit slower than this, but it's much faster than this. Does that make sense? Is that? Am I
Last one again, I didn't get that.
this
Yeah.
versus this
Yeah.
versus this?
I don't understand the feedback.
I'm moving my body. I'm taking my whole body weight, and my feet have to move to do that. Okay? So what I'm talking about is the hand moves fastest, the body moves second fastest, and your upper body moves second fastest, and your weight, your whole body mass, moves last.
Right.
Or moves slowest. I'm sorry, moves slowest. So what we're really doing isn't moving 1, 2, 3. We're moving them all at the same time. But they're ending at the same time, right? You have to start with the legs and the body so that the hand, who's moving very fast, ends at the same time the hip does. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Right? So what you're doing is trying to combine all these movements. You're only starting this one first because it's slow. This one starts second because it's not quite as slow, but it's still slower than your hand. You want all of these things to end at the same time. Okay? So what we're looking for is that moment of impact. All of these things come together in that moment of impact. You start with this, follow with this, follow with the hand, and they all end in that moment. And then you can, if you need to, if you haven't timed it right or your opponent has had the temerity to move on you, yeah, I know, it's disrespectful. You should be able to lock it back up if you need to. If you need that little bit of extra oomph, you can put it back in your hand once you've got it on target. Any questions? Did we get that? No? Kinda? No? Oh, you're okay? Okay. You're shaking your head and saying yes.
No,
Okay. Talking about gross versus fine motor control. Okay, so one of the things I was talking about is that precision is more important than power in our game. Because once you've got a certain level of power, you're there. You don't have to get more and more powerful all the time. But we do need to get more and more precise. Precision is everything. Because if I can't lay the stick on the target, it's no good. It doesn't matter how hard I can throw it. Well, I guess according to the current rule set, back when I started, if I got something, anything, in the way of that sword, it was no good. And if you talk to any of the guys who are doing these steel fighting in Europe, they'll tell you that with a real sword, you get anything on it, it's no good. You have got to hit edge on, unimpeded, perfectly, for an edged weapon to actually deliver impact. If it is off by 2 degrees, it jams your hand, bounces off. Okay? So maybe it's a conceit of mine, I try and limit myself to making sure that shot is clean and unimpeded. And that requires precision. Okay. So we talk about throwing the blow. When I say throwing the blow, I'm literally talking about throwing my sword at my opponent. Now I'm going to try and catch it before it gets to him. But I am letting the sword go from here, like a shotgun. The sword is on its way. If I'm doing it right, anybody got a cruciform sword? Actually, that little wakizashi. Oh, he's got some knee bucks over there. Look at that. So, if I'm doing this right, the shot's on its way. From about here, I don't have to do anything to it. If I let go of it, it would continue on its way and hit my opponent hard enough to kill him. Okay? So what I'm trying to do is throw the sword and then arrest it. Stop this end of it so that this end speeds up. Right? It's not, we used to talk about the snap, right? And the snap was actually a pulling in at the back of the hilt. I don't know anybody who actually does that anymore. This kind of trying to get a whip requires perfect timing every time. And I guess my timing isn't that good. Because I can't rely on, because if I'm pulling my sword away from my opponent, that just seems counterintuitive to me. I don't know about the rest of y'all, but I want to go cut in. I want to go through my opponent. But I'm not trying to cleave it. I'm not trying to keep power on it all the way to the ground. Let me get into that a little more detail. I watched Sagan's last year's class. You familiar with that one? interesting stuff. A lot of heady stuff there. He talks about the difference between the size of the shield and the size of the sword, and how do you get that sword past that big shield? Well, like I was saying, Mark and I were talking last night, you aren't trying to throw around a shield. You're trying to throw into the space where the shield is not. Right? A small but significant difference in the way you should think about it. Okay? So, there's always a race being run, offense versus defense. The reason I can get my sword into that slot before the shield moves is because this is much lighter and moves much, much faster than a shield in any circumstance. Okay? So, you're good? So, the race I'm running is, you got to think about this now. If I had a whole sword here, right? I've got to move this point of my sword, right, over a distance of about 6-7 feet to hit my opponent. My opponent has to move his shield about that far. The only advantage I have is we're running a race. It's like we're running a race that we were going to run earlier, right? I have to run 100 yards. He has to run 2 yards. He's carrying weights. I'm not. My big advantage, though, is I get to say go. And I can take all afternoon to say go. He knows we're going to be running a race at some point. But I can just say go. Right? If I'm waiting until he's ready, what are my chances? My chances keep going down and down the more ready he is. So I'm trying to make him less ready. I'm trying to show him less.
Not only that, there's 2 finish lines. So you get to determine whether you're running uphill or downhill. He doesn't know until you start running.
Yeah, he doesn't know where the finish line is either. I can start running towards the finish line, and he has to chase me to the finish line. Okay? With experience, you can predict where the finish line is. All right. I'm getting a little ahead of myself with that. The sword itself, I used to have a little stick that I could bring around to translate this. The sword has a sweet spot. You guys all familiar with that concept? Right? You know what it is, what the mechanics of that, the physics of that is? Everybody knows it's about 1/4 to 1/3 in from the tip. That's where your sweet spot is. Depending on the length of your sword, the shorter your sword, the closer it is to the tip. Okay? The reason that exists, what that is, what you're looking at, that sweet spot is the node in the frequency of your sword. Play physics, right? If you took a long stick in one hand and you do this with it, you'll see that eventually it has a bow and the tip moves up and down, and there's a bow that moves in the opposite direction. Okay? That spot where those 2 curves meet is the node. That's the sweet spot. That's where you get most transmission of power. That's important to your range. Because if you're fighting a guy and you're hitting him with the last 3 or 4 inches of your stick every time, you might get him to take it. Just if you keep hitting him clean with it, he'll just be embarrassed. But chances are you're not really delivering the amount of power you want to deliver. Or you're having to really, really crush the shot in there to get those last 3 inches to count. So where you really want to be is in that last 8, 9 inches, 12 inches of weapon. That's where you're going to deliver the most power. And it all comes down to how much do you have to work. The least work for you to do is to deliver the most power the easiest way. Okay? Because it all goes back into precision. If I can hit him easily with sufficient power, I can do that all day. Okay. Any questions at all? Does that not make sense? Is that not visually clear to everyone? I'm really that good an orator. All right. Thank you. Thank you. There will be applause signals various times during this. Oh, one of the other teaching tools, another visual teaching tool I use is what I call breaking the glass. When we're throwing a shot, because of the way we're rotating the sword, usually your hand is past the center line of your opponent. Right? If it's not, you're having to use that snap we were talking about. That's bad for your wrist. Hard to make sure that your opponent's going to take it, because if he moves out of line of it, it's gone. You're chasing him with no power. So you usually got your hand past the center line. That's what you want to do. So I'm just throwing that out there as a little, when you're teaching somebody and you're having a hard time getting them to follow through on a shot, tell them you got to break that pain.
No, we're good. I got the beginning part of it, the breaking into the glass.
Okay.
If you want to recap it and do like a 30-second segment on it, that'd be.
Okay. So if you have a problem with a student not cutting through the shot, not powering into the target, imagine a pane of glass standing in between you and your opponent. Lead with your elbow and break the glass with that palm. Forget about what your blade's doing at first. Just break that glass. It gets them to twist their body and follow through. Okay? All right. How am I doing time-wise?
You know what? I don't think lunch is near ready, so you're good. But if you want a break, you may have it.
Well,
It's always good for water breaks and stuff.
you guys are not giving me any questions to field, so I'm kind of burning through this too quick. Maybe I started too basic for a while. But I think all of this is important because everything I teach is based on that knowledge, having that knowledge.
Don't be a quiz later.
Okay. I will. I'm not prepared for a quiz.
Grace, I don't think you can start too much with the basics.
I agree. They just usually take me more time to get them. Okay. Okay, so we talked about that sweet spot. Another reason I talked about swinging the sword instead of pushing it. Can somebody get their helmet on quick? Just so I can demonstrate something. I talk about swinging the sword and throwing the blow, so to divorce myself from trying to impart force with my hand. Okay? Carpenter, anybody here do construction? Or do carpentry? First thing you learn when you're on a job as a carpenter is you don't push the hammer, you swing the hammer. The hammer does all the work. What I took that the 1 inch punch. Is that good? I take that. Okay. But I had to clamp down on the sword, push with my gut to deliver that punch shot. It's a valid shot. When you're in tight, when you're in a fight like this, and that's all the shot you got, and you can deliver that power. I usually have to take a half step back, get my foot where I can drive with it again, punch that shot in. Nothing wrong with that shot. You can't throw that shot out against every opponent all day, right? Or they're going to shut you down at some point. That's the only shot you got. The only way you know how to deliver power. Okay, so we want to be able to swing that sword. Sword power, force, whatever. We talk about the physics. No, I got to remember my physics. I even got the formulas written down here. Force is mass times acceleration. M times A. Okay? Acceleration isn't the same as speed. Right? What's acceleration? Velocity over time. Velocity over time. Okay? So, how much speed I can generate in this amount of time is my acceleration. Okay? Over that distance, not hard enough. or nothing.
Take that.
I didn't put any more effort into the second shot than I did the first shot, but I sped it up. Speed makes the difference, and I delivered it with the sweet spot, so I didn't have to put much into the weapon at all. Step a little away from the camera. This is another. This is what I was talking about earlier.
All you're doing is taking a step forward here.
Take that.
Take that. Without a doubt, I take that.
See, I didn't have to grip the sword at all. That's what I talk about throwing the shot. I mean, literally, you are throwing your sword at your opponent, and hopefully, if you develop your power correctly, now I can guide it into its proper slot, which is right there. Okay? Right? So we generated the power properly, sword is on its way to your opponent. Right? When I talk about I'm going to try and catch it before it gets to my opponent, what I'm talking about is arresting this end so that the tip speeds up even more. I demonstrated on Kyle here. I didn't really have the ability to speed up the weapon after it's gone. It's just, that's the speed it is. If I do this right, if I can get this sword to start rotating around a balance point, it'll go even faster. Even less work for me, because now that momentum is going back up in here, and that's what he's going to get hit with. So, throwing the sword. Now, you engage the sword with your hand, right? No surprises there. Your strongest fingers are which two? Right? And your thumb. Right? But these two fingers are what you want to grip the sword with. You're opening a bottle cap, you use those two fingers, right? That's where your power is, where your strength is. So that is what you want to be using to impart momentum to the sword. When you start the sword moving, you use those fingers to do it. Okay? Once it's moving, you want to get those are your good fingers, right? You want to get those back in your precision. So you switch from throwing with these fingers to stopping the sword with these fingers. What that essentially becomes is sort of a rolling grip. Right? So I end up so. Start so. Is that something everybody already knows how to do? Is doing regular?
I always knew the grip. Always grip the first fingers, but I used to do the snap at the bottom. Maybe that's kind of the same thing.
It's kind of acceptable. I think you're actually trying to pull the shot forward. And I'm not trying to pull the shot forward. I'm actually trying to pull the pommel. I don't want to pull it back. I want to stop it in space so that the rest of the sword keeps going to its original destination faster. If you do this though, I'm not trying to snap it, right? Because see how weak that grip is now. Okay? If I try and pull my hand back to increase the speed, I'm taking power out of the shot. It's still through my opponent. Okay? Hang on for just a second. I've gotten out of order, now I'm lost. Okay. So that precision comes back to these two strong fingers. We talk about the difference between, when you go to pick an apple, you use these three fingers, right? Because they're strong and precise. So you want to get the use of those fingers in your fighting as much as you possibly can. If you're clamped down on your sword hard with your whole hand, you don't get there. You don't. It's a club. I'm sorry? Inside the sword. Yes. I do now. But it's a two-finger loop. One finger loop I find is prone to injury because when you resist it as hard as you can. Not put how much stronger this middle finger has a lot of uses. But it is the strongest part of your hand. Okay? So you want to get that into the fight as much as possible. Okay? My loop then goes around my strong finger instead of my index finger. All right. We talked about that precision is what's important. In the period, smashing through your opponent's shield, throwing him to the ground, stabbing him in the eye was all perfectly legit. We're not doing that. Our game is about... See, it's the non-combatants. The non-combatants are bloody-minded. The purpose, the end game of our sport is to get the rattan on the steel. Get the rattan on the person of my opponent. Nothing else really matters up to that point. Once that point is reached, then we decide. You and I, we come to some kind of a decision, and I'm going to digress slightly into what I think is great about SCA combat. You and I decide who's better that day, that moment in time. There's not a referee or a line judge or anybody telling us who won that. The best thing about our sport is that we gain respect for each other. You don't trash talk anybody unless they are your best buddy. Am I right? In this organization? It leads to, if you do, it leads to embarrassment. Almost always. But that respect that we gain by looking at each other through the grill and deciding at the end of a bout, yeah, you got me, you beat me. It's all, I got to give it up. If he hits me, somebody here, Kyle here, cracks me right in the temple, and I go, nah, I'm not going to take that. Well, he has learned something about me, right? Most everybody watching is probably going to learn something about me. Now, they also learn something about Kyle now. If Kyle goes, dude, well, what do they learn about Kyle? It's kind of whiny, right? So we are all trying to not just be better fighters, we're also maybe along the way kind of becoming better people. And that's one thing the SCA teaches that any other organized sport I've ever had anything to do with doesn't teach. It doesn't integrate completely into the sport the way we do. So, God bless the SCA. Okay? Now,